Hello everyone. In today's video, I'm going to show you how easy it is to make this scrappy flag. You can use it as a wall hanging. You can use it as a large quilt block in a quilt. It's a free pattern. You can get it at tensisters.com. So you ready? Let's get started. Alright guys, so go to the website tensisters.com and print off the instructions, the pattern to make this. I also will have a link at the very end of the video. Then I cut 2.5-inch squares from jelly roll strips. I did red, white, and blue. I have my Pellon 820 and I have my iron. I also used a wool mat to iron, and then I also, of course, used my sewing machine to stitch the rows together. So let's get started. All right, so this is your cutting instructions. So depending on what size you choose to make your flag, you can make it a 9x14, a 13.5x21, or an 18x28. It just depends on what size scraps you have. So if you have 1.5-inch squares, if you have 2-inch squares, or 2.5. I'm making mine at 2.5-inch squares because I have some jelly roll strips that I cut into 2.5-inch squares. So then it will also show you in the cutting instructions here how many pieces you need of that color, okay? Okay, so for our flag, we do need to make some half square triangles. We'll need 8 of them. So this is the background fabric I'm going to use for my half square triangles, and then I'm going to use this really pretty blue stars. So to make our half square triangles, we're going to need 8 of our stars and 8 of our background squares. These are all 2.5 inches. We're just going to put them right sides together. And then we're going to stitch from this corner to this corner on our sewing machine. And then we'll open it up and we'll have our half square triangles. Okay? So let me take this to the sewing machine and make our 8 half square triangles. Alright, so I have my block laid out on my Pellon. Make sure that you lay your squares out on the back side, the bumpy side. The side with the print is face down. Now I'm going to get my little iron and I'm just going to gently press these blocks in place. Just to get them to stick so they don't move. But if they do move and you need to readjust, it's no problem. You just peel it. Peel the block right back up and then stick it back down in the new spot you want it in. So that's the good thing about this, is it's very easy to make adjustments. So say one got ironed on crooked. It's very easy to readjust the block and then repress it back down. Just pull it up, lay it back down where you want it, and then press it. Okay, so let me put a little bit of pressure now that they're all kind of stuck where I need them to be. Everything looks good. Make sure that they look straight. So when you're laying out your blocks, one of the things you need to make sure you do so that your wall hanging doesn't come out wonky is you got to line up your blocks this way, but you also have to line them up this way. So you need to keep checking all of your rows in both directions and make sure that your blocks are still lined up and they're not like curbing or whatever, okay? So we want to make sure that we keep these rows lined up nice and straight. And if one is off, you just peel it up, put it back down. It's very easy. You just readjust your blocks. And then you just put the iron back on them and stick them back down again. Super easy, guys. All right. This wall hanging is going to be so cute. Now you can make this into like a big bed pillowcase. You can do this as a wall hanging. You can make a bunch of these flags and change out maybe the pattern right here, the block. Or change the colors. Make a bunch of them and then sew them together as a quilt. Super cute, really easy, great way to use up all our scraps. All right. Now my printed background fabric is directional. And, you know, it's facing different ways, but I'm okay with that. I still love the way it looks. All right, so let me start laying out the first row, which is going to be red. Okay. So okay, so let's look at our pattern. So this is the row we're going to lay out now. This is red, and we're going to need 9 2.5-inch squares. Okay. So as you can see, I have all of my red squares laid out over here that I cut out of my scraps. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we'll just randomly take those 7 and lay them out. Then I have my white. That's my white rows. I have 6 stacks of those. Okay. So let's put the camera back. And let's start laying out our first row, which is red. And like I said, we need 9 of those. So I'm just going to lay these out. All right, so there's our first row of 9 squares. Let me press those down. Okay, so of course the next row is going to be white. So it's going to be red, white, red, and then white, red, white, red, and then we'll have some rows down here on the bottom. So let me go ahead and start laying out these rows right here, because we'll need 9 of each in these rows. So we need 9 white, 9 red, 9 white, 9 red. So let me lay those out and press them, and I'll get back to you. All right, guys, so I have all of my 2.5-inch squares pressed on to my interfacing, my Pellon 820. Now what I need to do is take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to roll over each row, and I'm going to stitch down this row 1/4 of an inch. And then I'll do the next row. I'll roll that row and I'll stitch it. And then we'll fold over the next row. And we're going to do this for the whole flag. And then we will go the other direction. Then we'll start sewing this direction. Okay? So let's take this to our sewing machine and start sewing it. And I'm going to show you, we will have to clip the intersections between our blocks before we can start sewing the second direction. So let's go to the sewing machine and let me show you how to do that. It's really simple. Okay, so let's sew our first row and then clip it so I can show you how to do that, okay? So we're just going to fold this row over, and I like to crease it with my finger now, just to kind of hold it all. Okay, make sure that you're folding it over right where the two squares are going to meet up, okay? I'm going to keep this nice and straight. We're going to sew 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so we have our 1/4 of an inch seam sewn, and that's how it looks when you open it. So what we need to do is we need to cut right here at the intersections, but don't cut through your stitching, okay? So let me show you how it looks. Do you see how you can see that space between this square and this square? That's where we're going to clip it. We're going to do it all the way down. And we need to do this because when we sew the other direction, we will be able to nest our seams, and our wall hanging will lay nice and flat when you press it. It won't be bulky. It'll be nice and flat. So we're just clipping. We'll do this on every row on the first direction that we're sewing. You don't have to do it on the second direction because it won't really matter. Okay, so let's just see how it looks. Okay, so see how it's clipped? But we didn't go all the way through. And remember, we have to do that because when we stitch this direction, now we will be able to nest those seams nice and flat. See that? So that's the reason we have to clip it. Okay, so let me sew all of the other rows and then I'll meet you back here. All right, guys. So as you can see, it's really easy and really fast to sew this flag together. Now, you don't have to use the Pellon 820 if you don't have it. You could use any kind of interfacing, or you don't have to use any at all. You can just lay it out and then sew all of your individual rows together and then sew those rows together and so on. Okay, so I wanted to show you a before and after. So if you need to know what size interfacing to cut out, the before is 23 inches by 35 and a half. That's the size you will need to lay out your 2.5 inch squares. And then once you sew your seams in both directions, your flag will now be 19 by 29 and a half inches. All right. So it is a great size block if you want to make a bunch of them and make a quilt. You could make table runners. You could make pillows. It's really endless and it's up to you. Well, guys, thanks for watching my video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Like and subscribe to Grandma's channel. Like and subscribe to Grandma's channel.